Right, you're live. This is Senate Appropriations, and we're going to continue our testimony on the budget adjustment, and we have staff here from the Agency of Education. I would like to note that we are starting 15 minutes late because there are caucus meetings that are held over the lunch hour, and people have been late returning, so we have not had a quorum to start today's agenda on time. So anyone who's watching, I apologize. And for those who are here from Agency of Education who have had to wait, I'm also sorry, but I'm not that sorry. Because we've all had to experience legislative time. So I'm going to, I don't know who's going to be testifying here. I could find my agenda. I guess we have Brad and Jill and Sean.
And I think Sean will go first, as that's what how the slides work.
Oh, okay. So we have anyone else from the agency? That's, okay, just the three. All right. So committee, you know everyone here, Brad?
I do.
You do. You know Senator Berkeley?
Yes.
I know a few folks, but not.
Well, Senator Starr, Senator Westman, Senator Shears, and Senator Berkeley. Okay. So.
Well, maybe I did get it and I put something on.
Okay.
I did get it. I'm sorry. I apologize
All right.
profusely.
Well, you should.
Now I have it. Thank you.
Good. Okay, so we've got the document, and our first witness is Sean Casino. Is that how you pronounce it? Or maybe not? Who's
Pretty close.
And your deputy CFO. So do you want to put yourself on record, and we'll start with your testimony, Sean?
Sure. Thank you. Yeah, my name is Sean Cousineau from the Agency of Education. I'm the Deputy CFO, and I get to kick off our presentation on the 2022 carry forward. Thanks for having us in your committee. You see Brad and Jill there. They're going to testify as well. So we're prepared to talk about the 22 carry forward, and Jill will be talking about the ESSER language in the Budget Adjustment Act. So our agenda today, we're going to talk about the general fund carry forward, the education fund carry forward, and then we're going to take questions.
Okay, so we should go to slide 5.
Yeah, we could skip right to 5 if you want. Sure.
Well, 4 is a nice photograph. But
Yeah.
I don't spend much time on it.
Right. All right. This is our finance and administration appropriation. We ended the year with about 73,000 left over in general fund. We have a contract obligation for 19,600, and we needed to carry forward 52,000 for a budgeted shortfall for our 23 budget, and that leaves $282 to revert. And
See, I can't imagine why I couldn't find a use for the remaining 280.
yeah, that popped up kind of late for us. So
I need pens, so.
Okay, so you had carry forward, and this is how you're going to spend it and revert a very modest amount.
yes. Yep.
Questions, committee, on this slide? Okay, we'll keep going then.
Okay. So our next slide is the education service slide or appropriation. We ended the year with quite a bit more money, 469,000, with a very small contract obligation, 230,000 in grant obligations. And again, here we needed 44,000 for a shortfall in our 23 budget. There's several other initiatives that we're carrying over funds here for, and then we're reverting 3,870 back to the general fund.
Okay, questions on that? So the carry forward,
Yeah, tech ed, maybe, there's been we've had a lot of discussion about tech ed and expanding that into different forms. Is that an ongoing issue that the ed department's working on, is to
and
get,
that's a larger question, a policy question as opposed to the, the carry forward here.
so they, money guys would need to talk with somebody else?
I don't know, I think I need to be clear on your area of inquiry, Senator Starr. The 25,000 is the carryover from the formula grant. What I was thinking you were talking about is just a larger issue around CTE funding and that program in general. And we can come back to it because I think that's obviously a significant concern. There have been studies around the funding of CTE, and there are some reports actually. I have one from, and I just happen to have it right here. This one, but there's another one subsequent to that. So, right, so that's a much larger topic than this, which is just the technical true up of actual versus appropriated. And we will be spending more time on that because the whole issue around how we fund CTE is has been a lingering concern yet to be right up there probably with police dispatch. So, yes. So is your question that larger one about how the CTE
Yes.
program and support? Okay. And we'll have to devote a lot more time, I think, to that issue by the time we're done. Any other questions about section B 501 on terms of education services? So in the end, after you have the carry forward that you're asking for, there's about 3,900 to revert. Okay. We'll keep moving then to 504 and 504.1.
Yeah, so these are two appropriations that we only grant funds out of. So we've got in the adult ed appropriation, 262,000 and that we need to carry forward for subgrant obligations. And that leaves 7192 that we're going to revert back to the general fund. Flexible pathways is next, where we are carrying over 600,000 for the dual enrollment program's spring semester obligations. And after that, we're reverting 182,000.
It's part of flexible pathways split in how it's funded.
Yes.
Yeah.
And maybe should just explain what we've got here relative to sort of that funding scenario.
Yeah, on the slide now is just the general fund portion. We have a slide later on that Brad will speak to that covers the education fund part.
Okay.
Yep.
All right.
And how does that relate to the prior slide, 100,000 for the modernization? Or one's the modernization and one is just the actual expenses?
Okay, so on 501, you have 100,000 for Pathways Modernization Project. And
Yeah, the student pathways team sits in the education services appropriation. So anyone working on that, the salary and benefits contracts that work on that area of our agency, they kind of live in this appropriation. So there was a
refresh our memory. What is your Pathways Modernization Project? We have a lot of modernization projects floating around. So could you just refresh our memory what the Pathways modernization and education services is? What are we
Yeah.
modernizing?
Yeah, I think it's, I don't have the good detail on it, but I believe we're looking to make some of our processes more efficient and how we put that program in place. The programs we're working with, dual enrollment, early college. So I think we're contracting with someone to help make our processes more efficient there.
Okay, is it IT or is it a financial?
I believe it's a mix of both.
That helps with the disbursement to multiple providers. Yes, Brad.
Brad James, Aids of Education. I believe, if it's what I'm thinking of, I believe it's for, we're contracting with an entity to come up with the collection of the data from the colleges. That's what we're doing, because it's kind of scattered, had hodgepodge right now, trying to bring it all under one umbrella, essentially.
So you can make the disbursements?
And yes, yes. And I can follow up and get you more information on this, because I don't know off the top of my head.
I'm seeing if I can get an answer from Jessica Carroll's right now, so I'll let you know.
Senator Birch, like you had a question?
Yeah, if they provide more information then. That would be-
Right, we'll keep going then. So this is the general fund and B504.1. And there's a reversion. Now, what does this pay for? That the ed fund, I know that we separate out admin and other things in terms of what general fund. So what could you, and so this is obligated for dual enrollment. Can you explain a bit how this appropriation works? And this dual enrollment and
No, are you on
I'm still on
So-
slide 7.
slide 7? Okay.
And
No,
so-
no, this is the general fund portion. Again, Brad James. This is the general fund portion. Adult education was moved over to the general fund maybe 4 years ago, maybe 5 years ago at this point. So this is that section of it here. There's still the dual enrollment, early college is largely in the education fund. There's one piece of dual enrollment where it's the next generation fund, where it's kind of a 50-50 split.
But this is dual enrollment for the spring semester,
It's a
but you're talking about adult basic ed.
I think what this is, I believe this part of dual enrollment is the next generation initiative. And that's what the statute says for dual enrollment is it's split between the general fund and the education fund. And I believe this is the general fund piece of it right there. It may be misleading.
All right. Anybody have further questions? Oh,
Well, why is it split between the general fund and the education fund? But I guess that's a bigger question.
well, that was something, that was done years and years ago, and I think it had to do with always a dispute, what's an education fund expense versus a general fund? And I think that was kind of a compromise that was reached in terms of the sharing of that educational opportunity. But that's a long time ago that was done. And if do you have anything more to clarify or?
No, I think that's it for on that piece.
All right, so Board of Education.
Yeah, this is our final general fund slide, and we're showing we had a small obligation for a contract for 1,500 to carry forward, and then we were approved for 10,000 to be carried forward for anticipated legal expenses, and that leaves us with 54,755 to revert back to the general fund.
Seems like, well, I don't know, what is the overall cost of the state board?
That's
Yeah, I think it's under 80,000. So yeah, this is a large reversion.
I was gonna say, that's relative to what I thought it was. Yeah, it's a very large reversion. What happened? They not meet or
Zoom.
they zoomed? But you still pay the per diem.
Right.
I think part of it had to do with they were looking at having some legal fees that they were going to have to pick up instead of having our general counsel do it for them, I think, and they ended up not doing that.
Well, you got 10,000 that was held in reserve to accommodate that potential. So we think the anticipated cost was more.
I think, again, I'm not an expert in the state board, but I believe their intent was to hopefully get some type of counsel that is their specific, that is directly related to them. And I think that the money they're giving back, they ended up not using what they intended to, is what I believe happened.
Well, one should never question that for conversion, but. Senator Burgess.
Does the AOE bill the board for in-house counsel?
That I don't know.
Is your council assistant AG or do you have?
Yes.
It is,
Yeah.
okay. So that,
But you have some counsel in AOE.
Yeah, what is she?
Emily Simmons is our general counsel. And then we have a couple of.
On staff.
On staff. And then we have Jamie Crable, who is now from the Attorney General's office. And we have Donna Russo Savage still.
you do,
Yes, we do. We poached her.
okay. Other questions about this?
If it's helpful, I got an answer from Jess to Carol this one.
You want to put yourself on record?
Yes, absolutely. Jill Briggs Campbell, Agency of Education, for the record. So the Flexible Pathways Modernization is a position. It's a contracted position. It's a data analyst, and it's temporary. Their role is to develop a streamlined data workflow for flexible pathways. So according to what some of Brad was saying about the way that we intake all the different data for dual enrollment, et cetera, et cetera. And it was created using carryover funds. And it's going to be an expansion of the existing statewide dual enrollment program, for the college program, increased access to work-based learning, increased access to CTE, implementation of personalized learning, and high school completion. So right now, those are all disparate pieces of data, and so we've hired someone who's going to create a single workflow that will be able to do that.
Well, that's what happens when we keep adding different programs, different
Yes.
benefits, and different providers, so that over time it becomes a bit like Minoan architecture. Shall we move on then to the education fund section? Is that where you come in, Brad?
That's where I come in, but I'm going to Sean do the first one because it's not quite mine.
So a $250,000 of purchase orders.
Yeah, this is again, our finance and administration appropriation, the general fund, or education fund section. We're carrying over a contract obligation of $250,000, and we plan to revert $1.6 million. If you're going to ask about the $250,000 contract obligation, that's on the Power School contract, for obligations on that contract from FY22.
What? It's
Power School's the accounting
Power.
program.
Yes, the SSDDMS, as it's otherwise known as.
Some people aren't happy.
No. Generally speaking, that's a good statement.
Is that the, what we put in motion when Representative Heath was chairing appropriations? Is that connected to the
I think so.
common chart of account?
There's a uniform chart of accounts, which actually is in place.
Uh-huh.
And then this was more or less, and correct me if I'm wrong, Sean, this was more or less meant to support it, get all the school systems on this, go school districts on the same system, and it hasn't worked well.
No, we understand
I
that.
knew that.
Because we kept extending the deadline, but
Right.
we do have a common chart of accounts in place, which was really our goal at that point.
Yes.
The question that it raises is, did we not spec it right? I mean, how could we end up with a system that doesn't seem to, I don't know, it's more of a rhetorical question. Forget it.
And I'll say I was off to the side on it, and I can't.
I take that
answer
position as well, if I were you, Brad.
I did my best to keep away.
I can understand. It's just unfortunate
Yeah.
that so many schools tried to move toward it and it really didn't.
It didn't work out. The
Didn't
company didn't seem to be as responsive as we thought, as we expected them to be. There are still problems in it that shouldn't be there. And it just has not worked.
And we're not requiring anyone to move to that system.
Not above and beyond who's already there. I think we have about 20 supervisor unions on it, running on it. So is what it is at this point, I guess.
Statutory requirement that everybody do that? That was just a yearly rule?
No,
No, we changed
it was statutory requirement. I think it was last year's budget bill, maybe 2 years ago, where you put a delay on it that's changed subsequent to that, where people do not have to go to it.
Okay, I thought we just delayed.
Well, we did for a long time, but then we
Yeah,
finally
fine.
acknowledged the reality of the fact that it was forcing something that was not working as
Yeah.
at the level that was acceptable.
Right. There'll be language this session that makes it not mandatory. I don't know what bill it's coming through, but
What still has been,
It's on hiatus statutorily, but as Sean said, there's language, which I knew I'd seen, I was couldn't have written on.
And that was the recommendation from the study committee as well.
Yeah.
Yep.
To abandon ship, so to speak. Okay, and then there's that 1.6 is available for reversion.
yes.
What
So
was the total appropriation?
I don't have that, but the two items that go into this part of the appropriation is the SLDS program, and that's I think around 700,000 each year, and then the SSDDMS appropriation, which I want to say is 1.6 million, but
Couple of years.
No, the way it's, it was on pause for a while, so it, the costs to the appropriation was a lot lower last year than it could have been if it was, fully functioning and moving forward. So
All right, so that's why we've got such a good size reversion.
Yep.
We cut our losses.
Cut our losses.
Not 1.6. Yeah.
and I think we carried over quite a bit into 22 as well. So
All right. Other questions? We're into special ed.
Okay, this is where I'll take over. Again, Brad James, Agency of Education. We have quite a bit of money here. We have about $58.5 million. We are asking to carry forward just over 31 million of that, and we're putting that up for reversion just over 27 million. These numbers are so large for several reasons. One, we used to be under a reimbursement system for the special education funding. And this is the first year where we have moved to the census block grant.
Which has been a source of some controversy.
Friction and complaints, yes. And that's part of the carry forward. So what we have done in the past, and this started in, I want to say 2018, I think, when we do the final reimbursement, what we do is we pay that final reimbursement in the following fiscal year. We gather that information that gets in the following fiscal year. And what we're trying to do was trying to buy that down by carrying money forward, carrying the appropriation down, because when you get into the federal, what we have to do for the federal part to meet maintenance of effort, we have to maintain a certain level of spending. So we're trying to keep that down lower than if we just let it spike up at that last year. That's what happened. And this happened this year and years and subsequent in the years 4 or 5 years ago started when we moved to the special education costs to the supervisory entity level, to that level as opposed to the school district level. It seems as though there's been a lot of overestimation. We have always appropriated based on what they think they're going to spend and what we think we pay now. And they have in these years they've been estimating too high. They're estimating a year in advance, but we're appropriating
But we
based on
didn't pay it out.
we did not pay it out, no. And so this is the money coming back that we did not end up using. That's what this is. So it's that tail that we're going to have to pay, and also that people overestimate. We're putting that money back up. We're carrying a substantial amount forward because this is the first year of the census block grant, and we're not 100% sure what's going to happen with that. What it's going to be enough. It is enough money because the statute says it's enough money, but there's something that I'm trying to work on. We're looking at districts that historically high spending in special education, whether since the law grant's hurting them or not at this point. So we thought we should keep some money in there just in case. There's section in statute that talks about unusual exceptional circumstances where they need money. And this also includes extraordinary reimbursement, which comes over the certain threshold. This year it's 60,000. I think next year it's 66,000.
But there's some children that are going to specialized school,
And
they
there-
could be several hundreds of thousands.
Exactly. And my understanding is, talking to business managers, is that more and more kids are exceeding that threshold. So we don't know what that cost is going to be. So we wanted to make sure we had enough money. So that's why we're carrying such a large number for it.
And do we have a sense of what that is buying? The reason I ask is when we looked at the cost of education in Vermont and special education, we had we're a huge outlier with the use of paraeducators and what we were spending. And we actually, I think the consensus was in some ways, the way we're financing it created almost a financial incentive to put kids into a special education category. So the block grant was designed, but so when we're going to that 60,000 or when we exceed it, will you be collecting data that, out of the number of students where that threshold was exceeded, X% actually had to go to some specialized educational program versus some additional staffing? I'm just wondering if we have a sense of where the expenditures were experienced and for what.
I don't know as we do. I'll have to go back and ask. But we've had some turnover on the program side who's more in tune with that than I am. I just kind of look at the total numbers and say this. But I'll find out. But again, as I said, we've had some turnover, significant turnover on the program side. So we have people who've been around but not necessarily doing what they're doing now. So I'll see if we can find out information on that. There it is.
Yes,
When you say we started the block grant, 24 and FY 23?
This year, FY23. This is the first year we're actually in it now. So we did the final reimbursements last fall.
Based on your
fall.
and that's what this reflects here.
Yes, that's reflecting that we don't need. So we're moving that forward.
So Senator Starr.
Yeah, I'm wondering, is this federal money or is it state money?
This is state. This is after federal money.
So when we get a revision of this magnitude, does that lower the statewide tax rate?
It depends on what you choose to do, what the legislature chooses to do with it in the education one. If you use it as an offsetting revenue, as a surplus to lower the overall expenditures, yes.
Do you have any meal program that needs 27 right now?
Well, I'm just wondering because, a few people are very concerned about property tax. And I wouldn't want them to go through without somebody representing their concerns here on the committee.
A lot of us are concerned about property tax.
When tax commissioner came out with his recommendations on the December 1 letter.
That's what Stephanie was just reminding. So I think she must have been, yeah. These are all assumed.
Statutorily, he takes this into account as an offsetting revenue. He does, yes.
So it's already been scooped.
It's already been scooped in terms of what came out in the December 1 letter.
So they get it before we do it.
You did it first too.
Okay, Senator Westman.
Yeah, the secretary doesn't recommend the secretary reports based upon what the statute is and does the calculation.
Yeah.
So it's not a recommendation, it's a reflection of what is.
All right, so, well, it'll be interesting to see exactly, because we've heard some districts say that, for a variety of reasons, they might be hit with a very, and it's not a matter of, they feel that they haven't done a good job of managing costs or educational plans. They just have sometimes the demographics of their classes there's a legitimate reason for why that spending is higher, and how that can be accommodated within the block grant.
The problem with the block grant is just an average for everybody across state. That's what we're going to right now. Some are high, coming down this number, some are low, coming up to this number. But there are districts that will receive more money than they need because they have a lower percentage of special education costs versus their total costs, and others that will not get enough because of that. Ideally, this all will come into action when the ideas of different ways to provide special education block grant, and the student census weights would all come into play all at once, but it hasn't worked that way. As I said, one of the things that I have the data some of the time sit down and work with it is looking at who are the historically higher special education costs, supervised percentage wise, and seeing what's happening with them and seeing if we need to make an adjustment and come back to you and ask.
And sometimes it's the characteristics, but sometimes it's just those judgment decisions, because in other programs, you can find you have a very liberal interpretation, application, and then others are on the more conservative side, and the question is, what is the right?
And then you have populations moving in, you have refugee populations coming in that impact this.
I guess that sort of tied into what my question was, what do the kids look like in terms of their needs, and particularly the higher cost, a sense of what their needs are, sort of some basic characteristics, but I don't know, they all, whatever. It's just an interesting question in terms of, we know, for example, within our Medicaid population, our most expensive group of beneficiaries are children with disabilities. And some of them are our $1 million babies. And that's what I'm kind of thinking about, those children, what does that look like within our public schools?
I'll see if I can find something out then and report back to you.
And to add to that, what percentage of Medicaid dollars are used, or what percentage are not accessed for Medicaid special ed? Can we get that, or is that school by school at the end of the year?
I think
You're talking about sped med?
Yeah.
I think that's going to be more school by school. I know that our Medicaid staff, we have 6 of them, are overburdened because they're I don't have the data with me right now, but it's prior to their caseload is going up and up and up and up and up. And they're not able to get to everybody. And so they were looking to see potentially for another position to hopefully help smooth that out.
All right, other questions, or Brad's making his follow up on it. You've got other staff here, so Brad, they can help with the list. All right, other questions about this? On special ed formula, I guess this year, we're just the first year, we'll have a better sense of what it looks like.
I'm hoping so. I mean, we're planning for a lot of things going on. There's still the after effect of COVID of the increased needs of kids. So I think everything's very much in flux. I think we'd rather have enough money on hand, or maybe too much money on hand, and then give it back next year, because we're not going to keep it.
We'll move to 503 unless there are any other questions about the special ed, the state place students.
State place students then. We had basically, we're talking about 6.4 million here. We're asking to carry forward about 5 million. And reverting just over 1.4. State place students, like short special education costs, have gone up significantly. I'm seeing those when I'm initially in the papers for paying people.
Do you remember Tony Campbell?
Yes.
That is ancient history, but Tony used to review every single one of those students around the need to particularly out-of-state placements and very high cost facilities.
Very high cost. And the cost has been going up there, and so that's why we're asking to carry additional funding forward, just to make sure we have enough money to pay to speak these programs, because we don't want to lose them.
And then this would include foster children as well?
If,
No.
no, yes, these are
If they're not in the
foster
same
children.
town as.
Yeah, these are foster children. A lot of this money is going out of state for people who are out of state, but this includes the in-state kids, students also.
That are placed in the
foster-
town or a school district outside of their parents' domicile.
Yes.
Senator Sears, that ring a bell with you?
Of course.
I thought so.
And my question is always the same. How does this match with other states per capita cost of sending kids out of state and paying?
He's adding it to his list.
I am.
I have always felt that we are doing it in a larger way per capita than other states for some reason.
Number of kids or dollars or both?
Per capita, I think it's number of kids in dollars.
Yeah. So I will say that we don't have any say currently. We don't have any say in what out-of-state place to charge.
I know,
We do, yeah, I know. But we don't have any
but
say.
Vermont taxpayers are paying it.
And I don't know how other states do it. I'll see if I can find it.
Well, it's always been my contention. We are more likely to.
Well, we also know we're bringing more kids into state custody than
Right,
many
than
other
other
states,
states.
so one would think our numbers
Yeah.
per population is higher.
Yeah, I think the overall appropriation on this line is usually around 17 million, if I recall correctly. And so
Well,
that's significant.
I'm gonna, I'll get in trouble with some of my school districts, but I think they find it easier to not have the kid in the school than to have them someplace out of state.
But that's supposed to be a review process, approval, and
Well-
justification. You're suggesting that
Well,
some schools might use that more than others?
well, I'll pull a Bobby Star. Maybe, we don't know.
All right.
We don't know, but I'd like to find out.
But
Well,
you have somebody that does review all the requests, correct?
I don't know as we do. I will check it out.
DCF has a person who
Used
reviews
to be Mary
placements
Harris,
in
remember?
state, but.
It used to be Tony Campbell, but
Yeah,
that would have
it
been
did.
like 30,
Yeah, this is,
Yeah,
I think it's
15, 20 years
Melody,
ago.
and I don't know what it was.
well, let me say it was a while ago.
Anyway, DCF, why do I keep calling it DCS? It's
Well,
supposed to be
because
the
you
math.
can't,
DCF has a person who is in charge of their placements to in-state facilities. So if you want to get somebody into a program in-state, they have to go through her. I don't know about out-of-state.
yeah, absolutely, because they tend to be.
Yeah.
The
Marion Paris used to be
yeah, so, yes,
the guard.
I don't think she's even living.
I think she passed away.
It makes it more difficult to do the
That's a
job.
cheery turn of the conversation.
Well,
I think
no,
that's a commentary on Dick and Jane here.
yeah, but
Um,
when we don't. Marion ran a ship that, it was easier to get a kid into Harvard than Woodside.
Well, she did run a tight ship, and Tony ran a very tight ship, reviewing every single child, and many of them, in fact, were in these would have been social welfare custody at
Yeah,
that point.
and then they become state aid to state play students.
And I know we do have somebody that looks at the in-state. I don't know about the out-of-state.
Okay, well, now that we've reminisced on page 503, let's move on to 504. This is point 1. This is flexible pathways.
Okay, this is flexible pathways. This is the education fund side, which is the majority of it. This is high school completion, dual enrollment.
Yeah, so what happened here?
I
Did
think
COVID impact this?
I think what happened with the adult education part was people decided that really wasn't K-12. It wasn't public education, and and again, I wasn't part of the conversation. It was moved to the general fund, and that I think that happened in 2017. I think maybe even earlier than that. I think it was 2017. And so it went out of the education fund. And at the same time, I think we also had at that point had Community High School of Vermont, I think was also part of the education, that went back out to the general fund.
And-
So a couple pieces moved to the general fund.
Yeah, and we familiar with that. We actually moved it into the education fund with general fund to support it.
Yeah,
And now the governor, I think, is probably proposing again this year, which we believe is, you know, an entitlement, and you don't lose it just because you're incarcerated. But the House has not agreed with us and the governor on that. But in the budget again, I do believe. So, got the durability of a cockroach, as the old saying goes. We'll be revisiting it. So it pays to be around here for a while because you,
yeah, that's true.
Isn't it a pleasure to be here, Brad? You gotta admit, the House probably didn't, your presentation was a little different.
It was a little different. They didn't have historical knowledge.
With the sense of humor. All right, well, one of the things that I think gets really lost here when we talk about the cost of education, and this is how much we're doing for our students to allow them, it's really this early colleges, a year of college free. It is really a tremendous benefit, and no one ever really references how much of an impact that has in terms of higher education costs.
It's huge because they can take that plus 2 years, 2 other courses if they did it their junior year.
Yeah.
I can't get my son Calvin to do this.
Well, why not?
I don't know. That's like, come on, Calvin.
So you can pay for it after he graduates. I think that's his plan.
That's his plan.
But anyway, I do think that, and we did have a cap on it, and of course Johnson had more kids in their area, and so then we moved it. So, all right. So, but you're still carrying forward almost 1.5 million
Right,
in
and
anticipation
and
that we're going
it's,
to see.
right.
Would that take it back to what it was historically? I'm just wondering. COVID kind of had an impact on.
I'm trying, no, I think early college and dual enrollment numbers have gone up every year, I think.
Every year.
I have to check that, but they might have tailed off a little, but I think they still increased during COVID. Because they could do a lot of things online. I know that our early college numbers this year have grown substantially over last year, right? I think, I want to say, going from memory, which is always questionable, maybe 290 to about 400 this year that are seen for this fall. So there's a substantial, it's always gone up. That's a big spike. So I think this is reflecting, we don't know how many kids are going to do this until we hear it from the college, and this is where they are.
But you anticipate the 1.5 should be
Yes.
enough to, based on experience to date.
Yeah, it's a little exact, but I think that's because other operating obligations and things like that.
So Fred, I happen to have this open for a different presentation. So we did see between FY 17-18, the high point for dual enrollment was 3,453. We did see a drop off during COVID, but it's starting to come back.
Education spending.
Okay, so.
Could you remind us what education spending is?
Yes.
I mean, because this is, what differentiates this spending from all your other spending?
This is the big line in the education fund. Education spending is basically what the state owes school districts after you account for state category grants like aid, like special education, transportation, small schools, and federal money largely, then a surplus, et cetera. So when a district builds a budget, it builds an expenditure budget that is every dollar they're going to spend, including federal money. And then it builds at the same time, and again, I'm simplifying because I'm not on the school board. It never happened. It builds a revenue budget at the same time so that they're equal to each other. Within that revenue budget are certain expenditures that are dedicated to the federal revenues, things like that, where they have to pay for. So we back those out. Then the state gives as I said, school district special education aid, it gives them category grants, in terms of small schools grant or support grants, transportation aid. Those are other monies coming to the education, but it also cut down that total spending. A district may have a surplus from a prior year that in turn is money they don't have to raise via taxes. So it's all these offsetting revenues that we subtract. When you subtract those offsetting revenues from the total budget, you get education spending. And that's what the state owes the school districts plus the category grants from the education fund. And that's the number for each school district that drives their tax rate along with people. So even in the education fund, what it's doing is it's aggregating them all. Plus, it has about $451,000 for private education, and another $500,000 for non-rural textbooks that will be sent out.
And you had a question?
The total is, it's basically it's a big number. It's like the
Billion.
education.
It's like probably 1.8 or 9
Yeah.
for this coming year. The total budget, total ed fund, I think, is 2.07 billion, something like that. So this is a large share of money that we owe. This is their general spending, is what it boils down to.
So you're requesting to carry forward just because of the grant obligations you know about and the balance
Right.
of 11.7.
You're right. And the reversion is substantially large this year. It's 11.7 million. 6.8 million of that was a mistake on our side. South Burlington did not pass a budget in a timely fashion a couple of years ago. And the way the formula and statute works, it says if you don't pass a budget, you get X number of dollars per equalized people you have. Out the door went, it was $6.8 million. When they passed the budget, South Burlington is a town that raises more on their education property taxes than the school district needs. So they actually send additional funds into the education fund. Everybody should send, all towns should send all their money in and then send it all back out, but it doesn't work that way. So basically they had $6.8 million they didn't need sitting there. And so they gave it back to us and we're reverting it now. So that would drop it down to just under $5 million, which is more on the normal side. That's still a little bit high, but that's more on the normal side.
There's a 23 adjustment in this line item up in the money section of the bill, right?
Yes.
15 or 16.
Yeah.
I think all this money would get worn out. It's been moved around so much.
We're trying
At least it hasn't been one.
More money.
Can I ask a question? It's a policy question, and I forgot the answer. Or is there any provision in law that would allow for the voters to vote on the overage in the budget to send it to a capital fund? Is that allowed in law?
Yes, what the law says is if a school district has a surplus, an audited surplus, and they get it in 1 year, and then usually shows up in their budget 2 years later because it's being audited in turn in that middle year. It automatically goes to reduce spending, it becomes a revenue, unless the voters choose to reserve it in a reserve fund of some sort or for a special purpose. But the voters have to do it. It can't be the school board. School board can recommend it, but it's the voters who make that decision. And then they can take that money, put it aside for a future year or for a future purpose.
Or sometimes replacement.
Replacement. So some districts do it. They have a sinking fund for roofs and maintenance. Some do it for tuitions, tuition town, because tuitions tend to spike up and down, number of kids coming in. So they're kind of trying to smooth it out.
So the answer is yes, it can be done.
Yes.
But the voters have to do it.
Right.
We always did it to maintain our school tax rate,
Yep, and that too.
to keep it within a certain.
Under reserve.
A range, yeah. There are a lot of different ways that people do things.
All right, so we're on to 507.
507, the small schools grant. This is not just small schools grant, this is also the merger support grant, this overall line of the budget. And again, just to refresh your memories, when school consolidations occurred and people voluntarily merged, if a school district had a small, that was merging, had a small schools grant 2 years prior, they brought that with them as a merger support grant. So it's
Sort of like a dowry.
exactly. I hadn't thought of it that way, but you're right.
At least.
Except some of them want a divorce after.
Yeah, so we're going through several of those right now.
Um,
Yes, that's in perpetuity unless they close the school building. Or if they merge that building with another building and use that building, then as long as they're paying for those renovation costs, it'll be roughly a 20-year bond, then they would continue to get it. So it's that's in perpetuity, unless until you guys change it. So what's happening here with this is we have a carry forward because there's always a little bit of wiggle room in there. We don't have the exact number. So it's here. Also, we now have one town coming in online in FY24, Lincoln. Lincoln pulled out of Mount Abraham, a unified union school district. I guess it's unified school district. And they're going to become their own school district and their own supervisory district. Because the state board decided that. It's a long story.
How big is Lincoln?
But they will be eligible for a small school grant in FY24.
With their per pupil spending is gonna be quite high then, if they're carrying that administrative infrastructure under that scenario. I think St. Johnsbury might be a single,
St. John's is the same one,
But-
Burlington is too, but.
yeah,
but
but
I'm
they're
saying-
bigger, they're bigger.
They're larger. Lincoln is very small.
They hope to.
It's probably about 120 students, maybe total.
And they don't operate a high school.
No, they will be tuitioned. Right now, they're currently part of Mount Abraham Unified School District. So it's all one school district. It was 5 towns that merged voluntarily until now. That had merged, and so they are all one district. And now they're splitting out, and they will be their own school district. And they'll be out of that supervisory union, and they will be their own supervisory district.
If you're carrying the business office and superintendent and principal, et cetera,
Special
for
education.
small,
It's
their per pupil costs.
right.
Right, we talked a lot about this in
We did talk
education.
about that.
I mean, my understanding is they're looking at someone who can do some of those things simultaneously. So, part-time superintendent, part-time business manager, whatever. They'll probably contract out on their special education, but I don't know what they're going to do.
So we have about a 34,000
Right.
reversion here.
I think that doesn't.
And then we're,
Oh, no, technical education, I'm sorry. If it's center, sorry, that's that earlier. I said, well, I'll read it there. This line is generally speaking for salary assistance to technical centers. Statute has us providing money for directors, and if a tech center is a certain size, then they have an assistant director, the co-op person, the guidance person, and one other one that I'm forgetting. But generally speaking, we never know what those numbers are going to be. And so what we do each year is we just say we're going to increase this year's number by 5%. That's what we're going to ask for, and we're going to give back whatever we don't need. We don't need $1.5 million this year.
I think it's 82 students.
You just looked it up.
Between kindergarten and sixth.
Right, but they also now have 7 to 12 students too. That's going to be part of their school district. So if you roughly double that, get your fee. But I knew that this elementary school is about 80 to 85, something like that. So I just did something for it. So, but now we have the 7 to 12. They're good tuition.
quite small, quite small.
With their own superintendent, that's great.
Well, that's what I'm saying, by the time you factor that in, it'll have an influence on your per pupil spending.
Yep.
Do you have a total amount for the general fund and then the ed fund carry forward and reversion?
I don't. Sean, did you hear that question? Do you have a total?
Between all the different,
Yeah, the totals, just the total.
We'll do that, so you don't have to do the edit. Because Sean will have it on a spreadsheet.
we probably have it on the ups and downs.
I probably do.
Yeah.
We have a big one from the administration.
Yeah, it's probably on
It's
the,
in there.
probably on the big sheet here.
I don't know what they have, but we'll do it, so you don't have to do that. So it's
Well,
good for us.
maybe,
When you take on, you're running through them, I don't know.
The only piece on this was the ed payment.
So that's the
what
reversion.
section will we? The
34.
education adjusted payment. I don't know. Oh, we can add it up.
Maybe 16 million on the ed fund side.
It was all anticipated in December.
Yeah. It's all in the December one, for use in the December one.
Other questions? Brad or Charlotte or Jill?
I haven't done my part yet.
Okay, well, we're gonna get to it because you have 22 minutes.
I know.
But maybe we've covered just about everything. Who knows?
Oh, just on something.
I've got something totally different, but a lot fewer numbers involved, so.
Oh, you're on the answer.
Yeah.
All right.
All right. I'm hoping it straight.
Answer is kind of in our dim memory at this point.
I know, that's, it's not in my dim memory. I have to live with it every day. All right, so I was off in the corner, but Jill Campbell, Agency of Education Record. And so what I'll be presenting on is some language, essentially. So no dollars attached at all. Nary a penny has to move here. The request is some new language added to Act 185 to give the Agency of Education the ability to reconcile programs for the ESSER state set-aside dollars. So this has nothing at all to do with the 90% of funds that are down at the supervisory union and district level. This is all about the roughly $44 million that is held at the Agency of Education that has been appropriated through a series of acts over the last 2 years. And the purpose here, I've got the language on slide 3 that's been proposed with all of the different acts that have made appropriations here.
Did the House include this language as presented?
Yes.
They didn't change it.
Not that I'm aware of. I think that the language has been left. And I will also say that this language was drafted with the Joint Fiscal Office. So Catherine Bennett and Sarah Clark and I worked on the language together. And it is, we are not inventing a wheel here. We did similar language for the Coronavirus Relief Fund, and there's some similar language for some of the ARPA SFRF programs as well. And so you can see that the intention here is that as we are making our way through these programs, and this is really pointing towards the ARP ESSER dollars, the ESSER 3 dollars, which end in September of 2024. So between that and ESSER 2, we have something like 30 different initiatives going. So as those grant programs, contracts, contracted positions, as we're sort of reconciling those, finishing those, making awards, where we have the ability to sort of scoop up money that maybe, maybe a contract RFP came in under our budget. That's great. Right now, we don't necessarily have the ability to take those dollars and repurpose them for other priorities that the legislature has identified.
Well, we want to spend all the money, and this
We
is
do want to
language
spend,
that
that's
allows us
exactly it.
the flexibility for you to do that.
Exactly. So it's a pretty common sense sort of approach here, ensuring that we don't send back any federal dollars. It has guardrails sort of put in it in terms of reporting requirements to the Joint Fiscal Committee in October of 2023 and October of 2024, providing an update on essentially where we're at in terms of that status. I provided a bunch of other slides just for some context on all of the work that we're doing, but and happy to answer questions. But just wanted you to sort of know where we're at in terms of those. And on slide 6, part of the reason that we sort of need this flexibility is as of today.
They are catching it.
Well, I'm sorry, what was that?
No page numbers.
No. The one that says status update on ESSER 2 and ARP ESSER set aside initiatives, January 30th, 2023. We have what?
It says 8.
8 live
This
grant
one.
programs. Yeah.
I got it right here.
So we have 8 live grant programs going right now. In 2 of those, we're just making awards. Another one we're making awards in the next few weeks. We have 12 live or planned contracts going right now,
Do
including.
you have any deceased?
Ones that are finished, ESSER 1. ESSER one died September 30th of this year, and I was happy to salute it
So
and send it on its way.
and we spent everything we could.
We did, we maximized those dollars pretty well. And so we're trying to do the same. You know, we've got ESSER 2 coming up. It expires September 30th of this year. That's largely grants to Vermont After School, the bulk of that money. There's also $3.5 million that went for the Macy's retrofit for Burlington High School, so that one's deceased. And then there's a little bit of what I call couch cushion change for a contract where we ended up having some extra funds for a contracted position. The other place that we can sort of look at potentially moving funds if we're not going to fully expend them is within our state set aside dollars, we can hold money for administration of this $500 million that's come into the state. If we're not going to fully expend those funds, right now, we don't have the ability to move them back up into the state pot because they were appropriated specifically. So we'd like that flexibility, and that's included in that language as well.
So, did you mention money for the Macy's conversion building?
Yes, that was done in January of 2021.
And what was that for?
It was the Agency of Education when Burlington High School was closed down because of PCBs. The agency used ESSER $2 to pay for the Macy's retrofit so that students could stay for in-person learning.
I thought we paid for that.
No, sir, I've got it on my budget.
I thought we put $3 million in the Burlington to help them with that cost to Macy's when they had to close the high school.
We can research it, but I don't remember that we did, because we were also, some of the air quality for schools, we were using this fund as well.
Yeah, so we have Act 72 is sort of the major school facilities initiative that's funded with these ARP-ESSER dollars. There's $4 million there. That's doing the facilities inventory and assessment work and a whole a range of other items. We're also using some of the state ARPA SFRF dollars. That's going to, through the Agency of Education, to Efficiency Vermont for indoor air quality grants. And then there's a different program run through DPS for heating and efficiency improvements, also using ARPA SFRF.
Are we on that page?
So you don't remember?
No, I don't remember that. I think we tried to leverage all these federal dollars.
Yeah, and Act 74, the budget bill of 2021 retroactively appropriated those ESSER $2 for Macy's, so that maybe that's what you were remembering, but it came from the federal dollar.
Senator Lyon.
So one of the acts that you list there was, I forget the act number, I know it says 197, which is a $3 million
Act
grant.
112. And
We don't know acts.
You knew I was
All we
gonna
know
ask
is
that question. You knew I was gonna ask that
I
question.
did know you were gonna ask that question.
So where, I haven't had anyone in my committee to tell me how far along that's gone.
Yeah, happy to provide you.
But are we trying to take
What?
money
I'm
from
gonna
the
shut that window.
program?
We've never.
We can.
So where we're,
Oh, I could shut that down.
you were getting a beam of sunlight directly in your.
Yeah, I was getting sun and it's nice to have sun.
I think the bottom one.
So where we're at with.
Yeah, that, yes.
Still there.
Thank you.
He's sweating over there.
I figured I'd get water too.
Where we're at with that, S190 or 97 or Act 112, $3 million was appropriated out of ARP-ESSER. 2.5 was for grants to supervisory unions or districts, LEAs, in federal grant speak, and other non-LEA entities. Those grant awards are being made like even as we speak. So those are underway right now. The other $500,000 is for contracted services for direct supports for educators. That RFP is out in the world and I think closed today. So we'll be reviewing those bids and moving forward. And so actually one of those places that I was thinking about this specific language was right now, if there was, $20,000 or a penny left over in the grant funds, because we couldn't fully award it, even though we've reached out to folks a lot. I can't move those over to the contract or vice versa, because of the way the specific appropriation was made. So let's say the bid comes in under and we could move more money for the grants, I don't have the flexibility to do it. So that's exactly what this was designed to address.
We will make sure that we have all the money expended, so this gives you the flexibility to.
That's exactly.
Do just that. Other questions? If not, we have about a 10-minute break before Agency of Human Services comes in.
So you don't use all these charts, we just look on our own.
Those
free
are-
time?
Yeah, those are, as I said, I'm happy to answer questions. Those are more updates on where we're at with the many,
What
many,
has been awarded?
many initiatives that we have underway.
What, which is which here? Which
So-
has been awarded and that's.
So the orange is work completed, or funds awarded. The blue is, sort of just, we have work to do there. So.
But it's not gonna be reverted.
No, it won't be reverted. It just means that the work is underway.
Okay, there's a lot, because there's a lot there.
There is a lot there. Yeah.
Which one are you looking at?
This one,
Particular? No, but
after school,
Yeah.
community schools.
And that was only Senator Lyons because those awards hadn't officially been made, but they're being made
Okay.
right now, but I need to be
so
accurate.
probably in April, this would look very different.
Absolutely, yeah. And in October, I would be able to probably give you, a much closer read of where we're at.
Andy?
Can you give me an update on the community schools, because it says awarded expended, but those are two very different words.
Yes.
So how much of that 3.3 million has been actually expended?
Well, expend is a little bit tricky when we're talking about federal grants because we run reimbursements. So what really counts is obligation. So we have awarded all of the community schools grants. It's a multi-year grant, so they get like a portion and then they do the budget. And they are making their obligations as they go through. For us, we look at, do they have a fully budgeted, approved award? And then are they actually hiring the staff, fulfilling the contract? Expended is less relevant for us because they could seek reimbursement up to
Sure.
December 31st of 2024. And I will also say, just for folks' awareness and all your free time, we've built 2 transparency dashboards on our AOE Education Recovery and Revitalization website, and I'm happy to send the link for that. One is for the supervisory unions and districts on their use of ESSER funds. For ESSER 1, 2, and ARP ESSER, and it's broken out into spending categories that are tied back to their budgets. And again, this is where that budget or obligation versus expended comes in. They did an excellent job of expending their ESSER $1, and we are looking really good there. We always had that doubt about whether or not they could do it, and they did. And then the second dashboard is actually tracing all of our state level investments. So you can go and dig around in there.
Great photograph.
And
also,
I was
love that, I was
thinking
talking about boys.
How to label it.
I have an 8-year-old. My 8-year-old made that face.
Oh, yeah, we are.
Oh, okay.
We had, some people had some questions on the additional slide.
Okay, so
Senator
we're on break.
Ruth says we have to leave the door open.
We're on break.
No, we're still
we're on
live,
break?
we're still live.
Oh, we are? Oh.
No, as soon
Now,
as we
yeah.
go off.